Chapter 8. A New Start? For Black people in America, 1960 was an important year. King was busier than ever. He decided to move back to his father's church in Atlanta. He spent half of his time working in his church and the other half working for the SCLC. King's policy of nonviolent protest was becoming more popular. Soon Black people found a new way to protest: the sit-in. Restaurants in the South were still segregated. One day, in February 1960, 4 Black students in Greensboro, North Carolina, walked into a shop called Woolworth's. There were hundreds of Woolworth shops across the country, and many had restaurants inside the shop. The students sat down at a table and politely asked for lunch. The waitress refused to take their order and told the students to go, but they refused to leave the restaurant. Instead, they began a sit-in. They sat at their tables and waited until the restaurant closed. Next day, some more students joined them. Then, some white students joined the sit-in too. The Greensboro students were arrested, but the sit-ins did not stop. Soon there were sit-ins at restaurants all over the South. More white students from the North traveled to the South to join the sit-ins. In July 1960, Woolworth's finally agreed to let both blacks and whites use their restaurants. Other big companies did the same. So once again, nonviolent protest had been successful in the battle for civil rights. Martin Luther King joined the sit-ins. When students held a sit-in at an Atlanta restaurant in October 1960, King stayed with them. He was arrested and put in prison. King was not sorry to go to prison. Like Gandhi, he believed that you should not obey a bad law. If the law is unfair, he argued, then it is right to break it. It is better not to obey a bad law than to obey it. If this means that you go to prison, then you have to accept that. King was not afraid of prison, but King's family and friends were afraid for him. They knew that King's life was in danger in prison. He had many enemies, and there were people who wanted to kill him. In the South in 1960, it was not difficult to kill a black prisoner. Coretta King went to John F. Kennedy for help. Kennedy had already said that segregation was a bad thing, and he promised to help King. When Kennedy asked the judge to let King go, the judge agreed. But Martin Luther King later went to prison many more times when he refused to obey unfair laws. 1 month later, in November 1960, John F. Kennedy became President of the United States. Across the country, people were full of hope. The young president promised a new start. Surely this must mean the end of bad laws and freedom at last for Black people in the South. But most white people in the South still did not want change. They were ready to fight to keep their way of life. There was a road to freedom, but it was not short, and it was not easy.